Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by William Adkins, a former teacher at Dallas ISD, Dallas Independent School District. William has recently retired and he is currently journaling his transition into retirement on a blog interestingly titled My Negative Split. With a wide range of interests, including running, hiking and travel, William has recently returned from completing the Camino de Santiago. Hello and welcome to the show, William.
Thank you.
Great to have you on. Whereabouts in the world are you?
Actually, I'm currently in Dallas. I'm not sure if I told you this or not, but I'm actually in the process of moving to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico.
Before we talk about your sort of transition into retirement, could you just tell us a bit about yourself, please, and your life's journey and when you decided to retire?
Well, actually, education was not my first career. When I was young, I decided that I really wanted to be an artist. And as far as careers, there wasn't really a whole lot of planning to it. I just knew that I felt like I wanted to, be making art and expressing myself in that way. And the ideas about how I would actually earn a living weren't really at the top of my mind. I just wanted to pursue my artistic inclinations, and so I worked my way through art school. But during the last year of my undergraduate studies, I had made friends with a lot of other young artists, and we were doing some exciting work, and people were wanting to find a venue for the work. In fact, we were doing these little pop-up exhibitions here and there, and we were getting the attention of some local critics. And so there was some thought about finding a permanent venue for the exhibition of our work. And so it was then that I founded a not-for-profit alternative exhibition space for this group of artists and myself. And I was director there for 3 years. But in the process of doing that, I realized that, gosh, I didn't really know anything about organizing a business. And so at that time, I had just I'd finally finished my undergraduate degree and was thinking about graduate school. And it made sense that I would look at a master's in arts administration. So it turned out the closest campus that offered a master's in arts administration was a little bit further away than I wanted to commute. I recently bought a home, and so I had to find someplace within a reasonable commute. So I did find a campus, Butler University in Indianapolis. So I coordinated with their MBA program, do all of my elective studies in arts administration as I earned an MBA. So my first career was actually as an arts administrator. I did that for several years. Actually, my whole career is really sort of reactive, not really very proactive. I sort of responded to a number of circumstances, like, I never imagined myself being an arts administrator or definitely getting an MBA, but the situation sort of led me in that direction. And so my planning really hasn't been much planning at all. It's just been more responding to the circumstances. But another response then, I found myself needing to relocate to Dallas for a couple of years. This is after several years of being an arts administrator at several different organizations. And I thought, well, I'll just move to Dallas for a couple of years. And I thought, the easiest thing to do is just get a job teaching somewhere. And that's what I did. And that was 20 years ago, thinking that it was going to be 2 years. But I actually found the student population. This is inner city here in Dallas. The first school that I taught at had what was to me a very interesting student population of approximately 90% Hispanic, and then most of the other 10% was African American. And I found that really interesting, especially the Hispanic students, was something being previously from the Midwest I didn't experience a lot of, and they were really interested in, and I was teaching art at that time, and they were doing some interesting, street art, some graffiti. So I was really became interested in these students, and ended up staying longer. Well, also another really important factor was I ended up just sort of getting a Fulbright Fellowship. I mainly just applied for this fellowship as a way to kind of get a little bit of clout. I had previously been actually executive director at an arts center, and I had a position in a much smaller town than Dallas, but I was in a situation where I was in a leadership role, and I was if I needed to talk to a superintendent. I just tell my assistant, "Hey, I need to talk to the superintendent," and by the end of the day, the superintendent would be calling me. And then as I started working as a teacher in a large urban school district, I realized, well, I wasn't just a teacher; I was just an art teacher, and so I was having difficulty just getting an assistant principal to answer an email after being in a situation where the superintendent would be calling me, up on my request. So it was really frustrating to me. And so I decided that I saw this opportunity to get a Fulbright. You know what? If I got a Fulbright, maybe that would get some attention, and maybe they'd listen to something. So I just sort of on a whim applied for this Fulbright, thinking, well, I don't really have much of a chance. But as it turned out, I ended up getting it and traveled to Japan.
Just a quick question: did you say an Albright?
Fulbright.
Fulbright.
Yeah, Fulbright. It's a fellowship. What was his name? It was started by a senator immediately after World War II. Yeah. I think his name was James or John Fulbright. Was a senator, and he decided that World War II was not really a very good thing, and we should try to avoid having another. And he thought, if people from different parts of the world, from different backgrounds, actually started talking and communicating to one another, that it would help. We would find out that we actually have a lot more in common than we do. So he started this program, and most Fulbrighters are actually graduate students, or at least university students coming from other countries to the United States to study. But there are lots of different types of Fulbright programs. There's like for American journalists to travel abroad, and American educators. And so this was a Fulbright for American educators.
Yes.
And this was actually a little bit different kind of a Fulbright. It was one that was done in collaboration with the Japanese government. And I later got another Fulbright to go to Senegal, which was a more traditional Fulbright. I spent the summer in Senegal. But anyway, I'd gone to Japan. Something really interesting happened when I returned from Japan and started incorporating my experience into my lessons. I was talking about lots of Japanese culture, origami, Pokemon, and all the things that my young students could relate to. And there was a young girl in my class. I believe her name was Priscilla. She was like a ninth grader, one of the younger students. And she had this really puzzled look on her face. And she raised her hand. And I said, yeah. And she looked at me and she asked, you can go there? And I thought, of course, why would you ask a question like that? And it took me a while. I don't think I realized it immediately, but thinking about that odd question, and wondered why would she ask it. I came to realize that these young students, and here I am teaching in the inner city of Dallas, and these are students. All of my students are on free or reduced lunch, socioeconomically disadvantaged. But despite that, almost every young person these days has access to technology and even their own smartphones. But they have all been online and on the internet, and they've all. This young girl clearly had done a lot of, seen a lot of things about Pokemon and other Japanese cultures on the internet. But she also realized that a good portion, if not most of what she sees on the internet is purely virtual. And I came to realize that she didn't realize that Japan was an actual place on the internet or TV, things like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, these kids, how can they see the value of their education and all the opportunities that a good education can provide if they can't see beyond a few blocks of their urban neighborhood? Yeah. And realize that they're actually part of a global community with all sorts of opportunities. And so that's when I really started globalizing my own classroom, presenting lessons and things like that would give my students a global perspective. Started, introducing things like environmental stewardship into my lessons, which of course is a global topic.
And was this something quite unique? Were your colleagues doing similar things, or the other teachers, or is it something quite unique to what you were doing?
In terms of consciously globalizing, I think it was fairly unique. And in fact, I was just sort of hacking it. I was doing the best that I could. And the very next year, I ended up getting an international teachers fellowship offered by Toyota and went to Costa Rica. And then it was that following year that I got my second Fulbright and spent the summer in Senegal. But I was just really sort of hacking it and didn't really understand. But then a few years later, I ended up, and by this time I was at another campus, I ended up getting an IREX fellowship run by the U.S. Department of State, Department of Education. And it was specifically for educators wanting to learn how to globalize their classroom and help build global competencies within their students. With that program, I actually went to Morocco for a while. But that was actually a year-long program where I did a lot of study here in the States for about 9 months before I ever went to Morocco. But that program really gave me a lot more to work with and also sort of validated a lot of the stuff that I had been doing, but it made it possible for me to really, pick up my program. And then at that time I was at a different campus. The campus that I retired from was actually within the same Dallas school district, but it was sort of like an experimental all boys school, where we had all young men, and we were setting it up, even though we were still a public school, we were going under the assumption that we ran it like a parochial school and with the assumptions that if we treat these young men that don't have the advantages of other young men as though they were those other young men, and with the same expectations, that they would rise to the expectations. And the school has indeed been very successful. But yeah, that's how I really transitioned. And in addition to, in fact, I started teaching because of my MBA. I actually started teaching some business classes in global business, along with my art classes at this school. And so that sort of like took me up to at least it was a big part of my identity as an educator. I've always considered myself an artist first and foremost, and whenever I did all of these other things in order to earn an income, I always considered that secondary in terms of my identity, and I consider myself an artist. And a similar thing as I started teaching art, I've always considered myself an artist, who's teaching, and so a similar thing happened as I developed my identity as a teacher, and I started globalizing my classroom. That even though I was teaching mostly art classes at that time, my identity as an educator really became more in terms of building global competencies within my students.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're sort of the talent for art and the teaching art and learning about art and everything was like a stepping stone to be able to do this, as you've just said, the enabling young people to sort of think a bit further outside of Dallas or whatever about the world.
Yeah.
It was almost like a tool for you, the art.
And, that really, I think, in terms of retirement and careers and all that stuff, I think that's indicative of really how I've defined both my career and what I hope to define my retirement as, is just finding a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I think that's really has been the key for me.
So I was reading your blog, which is very interesting, your journal, and you've got this mantra, negative split. Could you just explain that to listeners, please?
Yeah, please? I'm a lot of things, a teacher and artist and all this stuff, but I also am part of the running community here in Dallas, and I guess the running community, globally.
Is that long distance running?
I've run a few marathons, and actually that was one of my goals upon retirement, was to run another marathon. And the term negative split means that the last half of your run is faster than the first half. So you in other words, finishing strong. And I thought, what, that phrase that relates to running also could be a good theme for my retirement, since it's I'm in the last lap, so to speak.
But and it's also got quite a positive spin in as much as it's all about sort of doing better in that second half as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So, what was you retired? Was it earlier this year or last year?
Actually, it was my last day of teaching was in May of this year.
Oh, okay. So, what's your perception of retirement before and after? How has it changed? I know it's early days at the moment, William, but how has it changed, or if it's changed?
Well, it actually, the whole idea of retirement was something that I'd been thinking about for a while. I was actually eligible as far as my teacher's pension, and I think to retire in, I think as early as 2016. I think it was, I could have retired, but I told myself that I wasn't going to retire because it's, I've always had this strong sense of purpose, and I thought, I'm not going to retire until I know what I'm going to do, after I retire. And so I didn't really worry about it that much, even though I had become eligible for retirement. And then 2020 came, and that year came to a really difficult end, with the COVID-19, and we left for our spring break that year and didn't come back to the campus. And we tried, we finished that year very awkwardly, trying to do it virtually, which no one was really prepared for. But it was just such a, that's not the way I wanted to go out. And because I had actually been planning on in 2020 to do my retirement. But I still hadn't necessarily found that sense of purpose yet. But I early on, I thought, 2020 sounds good. There was a particular student that I had become kind of close to early on, and I thought, I want to see him graduate, and that would have allowed me to 2020 was the year that he would have graduated, and then I thought, okay, I can leave then. So, but then, when 2020 came, I thought, this is not the way I want to leave. So I sort of hung in there, because I wanted to see where all this was going to go. And then, the next school year was also another really rough one. Most of it was done virtually, and then with the students gradually coming back onto the campus, and then after that, most of the students were coming back to the campus. But the learning loss and everything. That the pandemic hit education really hard, and
it really did, and we know about that in the UK only too well, and I do feel sorry for those guys who sort of on that first year of university, they either went there and sort of stuck themselves in a building doing it remotely, or they were at home. It was a great loss, but hopefully we've got over that now.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the campus the new campus that I was at was also going through some new changes, and that I felt like I wanted to have, as what little influence I have, I wanted to try to help the school head in what I thought was in the correct direction. And so all of those things sort of kept me hanging in there. But to be perfectly honest, those last 3 years were really rough. And I found that I was really sort of, even losing my sense of purpose. And I felt like one of the really fun things about teaching was that I felt like I got better at it every year, and, I still feel like, I could definitely be a lot better than I was, but I kind of felt like, those last few years, I was not getting any better. And not that there wasn't room for improvement. I've never was a natural teacher. I just, felt compelled to do what I was doing. And I've always been kind of a hard worker. And so that's allowed me to, have some success as an educator. But definitely I was not the best educator, even on my campus, let alone. So, but anyway, I then, as I realized that, I don't think I'm really getting any better. But I really hadn't, this new, figuring out exactly what I was going to do in my retirement hadn't really, I hadn't really come to terms with that. And so that's when I decided, I need to force the issue. I need to just go ahead. I went and I told my, principal, I said, I'm retiring. This is going to be my last year. And I knew that, okay, now I have to figure out what I'm going to do. And that's actually, shortly after that is when I actually started that blog, Negative Split. And so I decided, well, okay, so what do I know? And I had been traveling a lot. And so I had decided that, I think I want to retire abroad for a number of reasons. Just one, I just like being, immersed in other cultures. But then I thought running another marathon would be another goal that I could maybe achieve even before, I actually retired. And then I've always, over 20 years ago, when I was still an arts administrator, I was running the organization I was working for had an artist residency program, and I had an artist in residence who had been visiting. And when she was leaving, I asked her, what are your plans? She says, "Oh, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail." And I had, at that point, never even heard of the Appalachian Trail. So I was curious, and I looked it up, and I thought, oh, man, that's pretty cool. And in fact, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the author Bill Bryson. Are you familiar?
Yes, I was going to mention it, actually. I read his book, very interesting. That was brought out about 25, 30 years ago, wasn't it?
I read A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, and I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. So I sort of got obsessed with that. But I also got obsessed with just sort of like hiking in general. And a lot of my travels, I started doing a lot of hiking as I was traveling as an educator and working all those travels into my curriculum. I ended up actually hiking the Inca Trail twice. I went to Patagonia and did some hiking there, hiked up Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa and some other hikes all around the world. And I thought, boy, this it's really a great way to, get out in nature, and hiking is really, I don't know if you've ever done it or not, but
yes, I have.
Similar to running, when you can sort of get out there on your own. It's a great way to meditate, and really sort of get in touch with yourself and nature. And so I kind of got, hooked on that. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice to get out there and actually get on the the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail or one of the other major trails and just spend, months out there. And so hiking the Appalachian Trail was also one of three sort of goals I set for myself. And then I felt that, accomplishing those goals, eventually, might lead me into something that really is going to give me, where I'm going to find that sense of purpose.
Have you done I know you've just done the Camino de Santiago, and I'd like to talk about that a bit later, but have you done the Appalachian Trail now?
No, I'm signed up to do it to leave on March 12th.
And how long is it?
Well, it's about 2,200 miles.
Wow.
So let's see, you can translate that into kilometers.
Well, no, I mean, we use miles in the UK.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Well, in fact, we use everything in the UK. We sort of bilingual in terms of millimeters and centimeters and feet and inches. We do everything. That's a long way. So how long do you expect that'll take?
Well, that's another thing, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm in the process of moving to Mexico, and that's a rather complicated visa process. I've got to finish that trail in time to get back to do that part of my residency. So that could be a little tricky. And
so what would you be doing? I mean, I know it's quite a long way, but would you be doing 20 miles a day, or is that too far?
That's a 20-mile hike. It depends upon, there's a saying, hike your own hike. I don't know if in the UK they have that phrase or not, but, different hikers do things different ways. And, like on the Camino, you'll see some hikers, hiking with trekking poles. Some hikers actually pay to have their backpacks shipped to their next albergue that they'll be staying at.
That's good to me.
And so, nobody's judgmental. You do what you do. And some people will even, during some of the more difficult parts, will actually take a bus. And for me, that would not work out. All that stuff I wanted to do it. I wanted to be sort of a purist and do it the way it was.
Yeah, and it depends on the terrain, doesn't it? It depends how high you've got to climb. And
that too. Hiking through the Pyrenees was no joke, really.
Yeah. And so I'd like to talk about the El Camino in a bit more detail. So you're going to be time bound anyway by when you do the Appalachian Way, but it's going to take a few months, isn't it?
Right. I'm guessing it's going to take me 4.5 to 5 months. And I tend to be, when I was on the Camino, I was hiking a bit faster than most of the other pilgrims on the Camino.
I'd love to talk about the Camino, because it's something I've been toying with the idea of. And one or two of the people I know have done it. And I know that, is it 600 miles?
Well, there are several different Caminos.
So I've discovered.
Yeah, one of the more popular ones right now. I mean, the Francais is the most popular. Seriously, has been the most popular, and that's why I chose that one, because that's what most people have done, and I wanted to, have a, I was doing it for the experience, and that was the most common experience. Yeah. But the Portuguese route is becoming much more popular, and then and also I think a relatively newer route is called the North route, and that goes along the coast. Yeah, but there are. I met people. There was I'm trying to remember her name. I think his name was Jonah, who was actually hiking from Switzerland. Started in Switzerland and hiked all the way down, and ended up being on the trail with me for a few days. So there's lots of different ways you can do it, but the most common starts in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France. And immediately goes through the Pyrenees Mountains, and unlike the Appalachian Trail, it's not really a wilderness hike. The Camino, it's more through countrysides and through small town, from small town to small town, and eventually larger towns, so like Lyon.
Yeah, so you've got no bears to worry about.
Yeah, don't have to worry about that, and you're not. Bushwhacking your way through rough terrain.
No. And what sort of places what sort of accommodation do you get?
Well, most people stay in albergues. Some people will check into a hotel. In fact, I got kind of sick along the trail. I got into some bad water, I guess, along with some other pilgrims. And I actually checked into a hotel for a couple of days to recuperate. But all the other times I was in an albergue, which is like essentially a hostel.
Yes.
And so that's what the accommodations are like. And here again, unlike the AT, where most of the nights I'll be sleeping in a tent. Occasionally along the trail they'll have shelters that you can stay in, which are basically just 3-sided structures with a roof. So if it's raining, it's a little better.
And just for listeners' benefit, the Camino de Santiago is basically replicating what the pilgrims used to do, isn't it? To end up at Santiago.
Yeah, I believe it was St. James who walked the distance, I guess, to Santiago, and it's sort of like it's a way for the pilgrims to, I guess, affirm their faith if they happen to be Catholic, and do that, follow the paths of St. James, even though there are different paths.
What are the most popular times of year to do the trail?
I believe I started a little bit closer to the summer. A lot of people try to avoid the summer because of the heat.
Yes.
And a lot of people will start, I think, in May or late April. And I think the weather conditions are a little more accommodating then. I was still teaching in May. So I essentially, that's sort of like, once my retirement was sort of like, my starting point. It was literally just 2 or 3 days after my last day of teaching that I was off to hike the Camino. So I started in, I think it was June 6th, actually, was when I actually started from Saint Jean Pied de Port. And it took me about 30 days to get to Santiago.
That's a good progress. I know some people sort of 6 or 7 weeks, isn't it? So that's good.
Yeah, but then you can also you also have the option of hiking on to Finisterre, which is to the coast, and which I decided, you know what, I'm going to do that too, and so I did that, and so that added about 3 more days to my hiking, and so and so I think it was maybe closer to 500. Almost 600 miles total then when you added all that in.
Well, I was looking at some of your videos, some of your YouTube videos, which you've got on the blog, and we'll put your blog, if you don't mind, on the show notes so that people can have a look. And,
sure.
I particularly encourage people to have a look at those videos because they're quite interesting. Yeah. So what types of people did you meet on that walk?
Oh, all types of people. And, people hike the Camino for different reasons. For me, it was like that threshold, that transition into my retirement. Okay, I'm done with this part of my life. In fact, there's I forget what they call it, but there's a place where there's this tall pole with a crucifix at the top of it. I can't remember what they call this thing, but there's a mound of rocks at the base, and it was a place where people will bring things, photographs of loved ones and other little trinkets and things that they will leave there as a portion. So my last day of teaching, because I had been doing a lot of research and I heard about this place, and I thought, well, what am I going to bring to leave at this place? And I was just out there standing where as students were coming in and out of the building, and one of my duties first thing in the morning was to stand out there to make sure that things go well as buses are unloading and parents are dropping off students and things. And I just happened to look down, and there was this little plastic little thing that looked like could have been a little piece of like candy or something, but it was just a clear plastic thing that really meant absolutely nothing, and that had probably fallen off of somebody's clothing or backpack or something, and it had absolutely no meaning as far as I knew. But it was something that I'd picked up from that campus, and I thought, you know what, this is what I'm going to leave there, and when I leave it there, that will be my official leaving that part of my life behind and heading off into the new part. So that was there's a lot of symbolism to the trail that people bring to it. And so there was lots of different kinds of people. I met a gentleman from Ireland who, I guess a survivor, a brain cancer tumor survivor. And he was hiking, and in fact, that first night, I stayed at an albergue, which was just a short walk from Saint Jean Pied de Port, because it's kind of an iconic albergue. It's called Orison, and I'd seen that in a lot of other people's videos. So I thought, I'm going to spend the night there. And actually, it was kind of nice because that first day hiking up the Pyrenees, that's a challenging hike.
Yes, I bet.
And it was. So I stayed there the first time, and there is where the pilgrims sort of meet each other for the first time. And in some cases, there was a case of one couple that I actually all the way through to the end kept seeing.
Yes.
But to see some meet people the first time, and so that's where people would share, who they were, what their backgrounds are, and what has brought them to the Camino. And so lots of people shared, a lot of their things. And if you've watched any of those videos, people will share. It's a common theme is that they've lost a loved one, and they're wanting to just sort of like deal with that. And so, yeah. So there's all kinds of people. Young people, well, there tends to be a lot of young people that are maybe just finishing college, or maybe they've just finished their secondary education and getting ready to move on to college and wanted to take, the summer off to hike the Camino before they start their college. So it's a lot of younger people. And then there's a lot of people that, they've like me, that they've just retired. And so they've got the time to do it. But there's people really of all ages and all backgrounds from all over the world. The Camino seems to be particularly popular with people from South Korea now. I met a lot of South Koreans. And people travel or hiking with family members. Well, another thing, a lot of people will hike the Camino, but they won't do the entire. They'll just do a section of the Camino.
Yes.
So I met a woman from really interesting woman actually from Barcelona. She is a doctor there, and she was just hiking a section from Burgos to Leon, and we actually spent a couple of days getting to know each other and walking together, and she was really interesting. And then there was another woman hiking with her two sons, she was actually from the United States, but moved to Spain with her two sons, and they were living in the south of Spain, and she was just hiking a small section with her two sons. And I hiked for one day off and on with the three of them.
Yeah.
And so there were like I said, all kinds of this fella from Switzerland. I started off the first week or so. If you've seen my videos, the young couple that were beginning their graduate studies in the States were about ready to start, and spent a lot of hiking time with them early on, which was convenient for me because he was had the young man actually grew up in Spain and spoke fluent Spanish, so that made it a little bit easier as I was picking up my Spanish. It was helpful.
So it sounds like although a lot of people do the actual trip solo, not everybody, but a lot of people do. There's a good community thing where you sort of meet up at night, change stories, and sometimes walk with others.
Yeah, definitely. But then, there's also plenty of time when you just have some nice alone time, especially early on. Now, the last, once you get, what's that town? Once you get into the last 100 kilometers to officially have done the Camino, to get your certificate, you have to have hiked at least the last 100 kilometers. And so once you get to that point, you see a lot more people. and that was something a little bit kind of hard for me to deal with once it started happening, especially the very last day. I felt like I was in Disney World because of the crowds of people. But because I really, even though I enjoyed the time that I spent talking to the friends that I met and hiking with them, sometimes for the entire day, I also enjoyed, the alone time. There was a lot less of that during the last 100 kilometers. Yeah.
Yes. So has the experience changed you? Have you learned anything since having accomplished the Camino?
Well, I feel like I'm a lifelong learner anyway, and I'm always sort of changing and adapting to what's put in front of me. Yeah, in fact, in my vlogging, I tried to talk about some of the things that I learned. And I tend to be kind of, because I'm so, I'm all about a sense of purpose and, getting something accomplished and things like that. I tend to be kind of a type A kind of person. And I'm very conscious about how long time and how long something's taking. But in Spain, in the United States, when you go to walk into a store or a restaurant or something, rather, you sort of expect to be greeted right away. And if you're at a restaurant, you expect to get service right away and do everything to happen promptly and right away. But my experience in Spain, and this has been my experience in other countries as well. It's a lot more laid back, and you can and just because you sit down at a restaurant and you're not greeted right away, and things don't happen immediately, doesn't mean you're not getting good service.
No.
It's just another way. And I found that, those opportunities to just sort of sit without the clock ticking, I found that I had opportunities to talk to people sitting at, the table next to me, and, having good conversations. And then, in the States, once you've finished your appetizer or your salad, you sort of expect the waiter to be there immediately to take that dish away and set your entree in front of you, and that may or may not happen, in Spain and other countries in Spain. But one thing I did notice that a lot of times when I would order, my vino tinto, a glass of or my red wine, a lot of times they would actually bring out the bottle and set it there at the table, and so that made it a lot easier when I was waiting for my next course.
Yes, I bet. No, that's
yeah.
So you were almost not forced, but you were encouraged to sort of make the most of the present moment.
Yeah, and then, well, another thing that I talked about was, when you're in retirement, you're at the end, and you're sort of like you get a lot more. Your mortality is a lot more real to you, as you get to my age, and so there's a sense of urgency because of that. However, you want to make the most of it, and something that I discovered, when you first have that sense of urgency, you thought, oh gosh, I got to go, I got to get as much out of accomplish as much of my bucket list as I can before I kick the bucket, and but I sort of discovered that, to really get the most out of life, it helps to slow down a little bit, and really take it in, really experience the bouquet of the wine, before you take that first sip. And
if we've got any listeners that are coming up to retirement or even perhaps, quite a few years away, what sort of, because you obviously had this sort of plan in your mind for quite some time, but you were sort of accelerated a bit with COVID. But what are the top things that you think people need to think about before they retire?
Oh gosh, I think everybody's different. In fact, it's sort of been my motto. I tried to avoid giving advice, and I prefer to just share my perspective and my experiences.
Yes.
And I can tell you what my perspective is, but that might not be what somebody else's is. And a lot of it, I think, in terms of retirement, how you deal with your retirement is how you dealt with your work. And I'm one of those people, who will I often say, I don't think I've worked a day in my life, and it's because of that sense of purpose that I've always had. I've always felt compelled to do what I've been doing, even in these really maybe some more mundane jobs that I had as I was working my way through college. That was all part of the college experience. And so, I was a waiter. I'd been a waiter, and the restaurant industry is rough, and that's tough work. But it was part of my college experience. That was what was making, the other part of my days when I was in the classroom possible. And so I really didn't separate that from, my college experience, all the different jobs that I held working my way through college. And then as an artist, I've always considered myself an artist, and artists never retire. So in that sense, I'm still not retired. I'm looking forward to really being actually much more productive in my studio now that I don't have these other obligations.
And I know that this podcast will be listened to a lot of people who are at that point and either have retired or they're thinking about retirement. And I personally don't. I mean, I retired in quotes last September, but I've never liked the word retiring. I prefer to think of it. I've sort of left corporate life, which I enjoyed, I have to say. But I want to do more. But I think what you're sort of really saying is it's very much an attitude of mind that you've had throughout your life, and you're just carrying on, but in a different way.
Yeah. But I know there are other people that, have a different, not that they don't have a sense. A lot of other people, I don't really have a family. At least I'm not married and I don't have any children. And for a lot of people, in fact, maybe most people, that is their sense of purpose, their families.
Yes.
And, good for them, and in fact, as I've traveled and I've vlogged, I've occasionally, in fact, as I was on the Camino, a young woman that I had actually gone to high school with expressed, how impressed she was with what I was doing and all this stuff. And I would see her on Facebook. We're Facebook friends, and she would be talking about her family a lot and things like that. And and so I replied to her how impressed I was with the family, the amazing family that she had, and all those things. And she had sort of expressed that, some regrets that she wasn't able to do a lot of things that I was doing. But then, I tried to tell her that, she's doing a lot of stuff that I just don't have the opportunity to do. The people that have families, I think retirement to them might be a lot easier, because all of a sudden they get to really fully immerse themselves. If they've been, if they've been the breadwinner and they've been, leaving home early in the morning, coming back late, exhausted, and going to bed, immediately, and having, maybe, once or twice a year, take a little vacation with their families. That's, I'm sure that they really long to spend more time with their families. And so retirement, gives them, those opportunities. So yes. I think to them, retirement is something completely different than what, my retirement is going to be. So,
yes. Yeah. So what would be your message to anybody who is thinking about retirement and they're coming up? What would be your main message to them?
Well, here again, share my perspective. Embrace. Find a sense of purpose and embrace it, and have fun. And in fact, the title for my YouTube channel is I'm not dead yet, and in fact, that's in reference to a Monty Python reference. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm not dead yet, and so that has sort of been my theme in my retirement. And in fact, that first day in Orson, when people were they were asked to say, well, why are you hiking the Camino? That was all I said. Well, I'm not dead yet. So that was my reason for hiking the Camino.
Well, William, this has been a really interesting conversation. I'll put the link to your site on the show notes so that people can have a look at those videos and read your journal. I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much, William.
Okay, thank you.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.